I am here with Hannibal Scipio II. And he is the head of partner marketing for Promethean Inc. Today, we're getting a chance to learn more about the work that he does with Promethean. Before we get into the work you do, can you tell us a little bit about you, Hannibal Scipio, in general?
How I would best describe myself is I'm a burgeoning global citizen that always had a knack for curiosities and inquisition about the world, how it works, why things are the way they are. And so that kind of led me down a path of, throughout my childhood, a lot of book reading and then imagination that spawns from that. The sci-fi movies as well. One of the phrases, I'm probably going to butcher it, is magic is only a science that's not yet been figured out. And so even it was the 80s or the 90s, and there was kind of this futuristic movie about the 2000s and flying cars. Back to the Future being a good example of that. It's possible. But how do you make that happen? So those kind of, questions and curiosities about the world. And I know for me, one of the things that was, I'm sure, a great break from my mom was dropping me off at the library on Saturdays or what have you. And I would just spend all day in the library reading books, doing research, and have all types of little drawings and ideas of how to, make flying cars or maglev trains, stuff like that. So that was kind of, I don't know if it was innate and it was just nurtured in context of my desire for, creating based upon examples of the art of the possible in people's imagination.
Nice. So it sounds like you were just a pretty inquisitive kid across the board, right?
I would imagine most kids are.
Yeah. I would really agree with that, actually. So I'm wondering, from your experience as a kid having to sort of drop off at the library, which is awesome, do you feel like school was a space where you were able to go further in that knowledge? Or do you feel like it was a place that sort of bred or nurtured, as you say, that space? Or did you get that nurturing somewhere else?
As I reflect on it, I think it's school, even at a young age, it's reflective of the world. There's a bunch of different forces trying to pull you into different directions. So I would say school, it was a bit of a yin and yang. I was in advanced classes, so that helped as far as challenging me when it comes to academia. And I've had some teachers who I would say poured more into me than I guess they would ordinarily, per se. And seeing that spark and doing some extracurricular activities or program like SECME was one of them. The Southeastern Consortium for Minorities in Engineering, right? So the mousetrap car competitions and roller coaster designs and the egg drops and all that good stuff was really cool. And I helped to kind of build on and nurture this desire to solve problems, but also still exercise some creativity. But then you also have the cool factor, being Black, male, and intelligent, who wasn't exactly cool. So how do you downplay that when you're outside of the classroom and be included in sort of the cool kids collection, so to speak? So that's one of those opposing forces. And then you talk about teachers who are for, but also teachers who are against based upon their own explicit or implicit biases of minorities or Black males in particular. And then having parents who are very forthright and strong-willed and believing in what I am capable of doing, counter to what a teacher may not see or be doing, so to speak. So the home life was also super important as well, to kind of provide a reinforcement of either being called a nerd by the kids or teachers trying to have a bad act when they just weren't challenging me, etc. So the home life was also gravely important to kind of help them to be their referee and provide a layer of protection to ensure that I can continue growing and cultivating to be my best possible self.
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple really good things there. And before I go there, I want to brag on you a little bit in that you have done quite a bit of things in your career already, right? So having a chance to
say so.
I'll brag on you. We'll give flowers for sure, right? You have your Bachelor's of Science degree in computer science from Morehouse College with a minor in mathematics. Awesome. You have your MBA from
Dallimore School of Business, focused on international business specifically.
Awesome. And then I know that you have worked in the tech industry for almost 15 years.
Yeah, just past the 15-year mark. Yeah.
Right. And you've had a couple of different roles, some of them being test engineer or in software developer.
Client solutions. So I was an experiment, as I found out 2 or 3 years into role, of them hiring fresh out of undergrad onto a senior software engineering team. And I, met, if not let alone exceed expectations of the possible of how young people have the capacity to wrap up rather quickly and learn and apply immediately, not just their academic learnings, but how that's applicable in the real world as well. So that's pretty cool.
And then so software engineering, and then also have sort of switched over a little bit to more of the business side of things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm in marketing now, but even the journey from being in a hardcore role that was deemed STEM, so to speak, and trying to evolve beyond that. Because one of the things I recognized was, yes, I'm great at the, algorithms, I'm great at identifying patterns and problem solving, but also recognize that the people making decisions that impacted my work were not of my background or were not engineers at heart. They were managers, they were marketing people, they were business folks, business development, etc. And so I was like, okay, I want to understand more about that piece of the equation too. Because if I'm the doer implementing, finding a solution to a problem that's passed on to me, who's identifying the problem? How are they shaping it? What's the impact of that problem to the overall business? And then that's my position in the grander scheme of things. So that kind of led to me wanting to go back to school, get more education. And at one point, I was actually really considering leaving the STEM space. I attempted to actually, and wanted to live more at international trade, which led into a couple of internships, one of which was really cool, being attaché for the U.S. Foreign Commercial Services in the U.S. Department of Commerce out of Rio de Janeiro.
Woo! Okay, I'm going to stop you right here. Okay, so an attaché. Break that one down for me real quick. What is that?
I mean, in short, I would just say that in its simplest form, it is a junior diplomat that uses commerce as a means to build bridges with other nations. And so what was cool about that, I had the opportunity to, again, step outside of the STEM world itself explicitly, but use transferable skills from the STEM world to make things happen. I still do that to this very day. But it was really about how to bridge connections as far as evaluating what market opportunities exist between, in that time, Brazil, which was an emerging market, a developing market, and those pre-Olympics, pre-World Cups. So a lot of energy in developing the country in preparation for those major world events. And so a lot of opportunities and excitement to figure out how to help U.S. companies who want to go into that market, but also how to help Brazilian companies who are trying to evolve their businesses with, I won't say IP, but expertise of U.S. businesses, et cetera. And so again, using commerce as a means for diplomacy. So that was a really cool exposure to just understanding other cultures, the forging of partnerships, what makes a good partnership, what doesn't. Well, that is critical, especially international business or any business, to be honest with you, but especially international space. And that kind of, I would say, helped to position me for where I am now as far as this phase of my career, wherein I focus on, partner marketing is usually the current role, but partner ecosystems, which is really about the premise that nobody, individually or as a company, is successful solely of their own needs. It is a network of your core competencies and skills paired with others working collaboratively to achieve a shared and mutually beneficial objective.
Well, I think it was interesting because you sort of hit the nail on the head of where I was going next about this idea of having had a couple different types of roles in industry already. Are there skills that transfer? And it sounds like it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so would you say, are those the STEM-based skills that transfer? I know you started in computer science. Do you still use computer science in the role that you are currently?
Yeah. So I would describe it in at least 2 tiers. I would say one, the hard skills being problem solving. Mm-hmm. What's the desired outcome? Okay, what are the inputs and how do I process that to achieve the objective? Writing code, that can be applied to a mathematical theory, that can be applied to a business objective. It's pretty transferable. And what I found, surprisingly, that trait to that skill is not as abundant as I assumed it to be. But that's also in part because when I step outside of the engineering world, there's other attributes and skills that are more abundant than those core science skills. I would say that's one thing that really helped my current progression and successes thus far. Just kind of really just been able to take the big picture and decompose it into finite tasks that all still ladder back up to achieving a common goal and bringing them along the journey. aside from that aspect of it, I would say the other component that has been advantageous is I walk the line between the business world and the tech world, because technology is irrefutably table stakes in every industry, no matter finance, education, social, what have you. Technology is going to be backbone to all of those industries' respective success, which feeds to this notion of digital transformation. So where I found it to be extraordinarily helpful is I'm able to speak the language of engineers, talking scenarios, talking use cases, drilling down the core features, but also be able to translate that and how that equates to end user experience, the quality of that experience, customer satisfaction, the ability to be able to collect and quantify data to glean insights. So I'm able to speak to people in the language that's relevant to them, but then connect the dots to boil it up to appropriate executives and key stakeholders.
Okay, so you get a chance to walk in both worlds, just talk to those folks, and even help sort of translate for people.
Translate and help them understand each side of the equation, because, there's multiple ways of thinking based upon folks' training, whether they're technical STEM versus of the arts, so to speak. So being able to exercise both sides of the brain, kind of cool.
Now, let me ask you this, since you've made the decade mark plus in the industry, which is still fairly young in terms of a career. So in that time frame, have you seen this marriage of or transformation of STEM or computer science in the industry to include additional skill sets, sort of as a need or a almost a requirement?
I would say that's one of the cool things about at least the tech space, wherein almost anybody of any background could contribute to the overall success. I know when we talk about diversity and inclusion, one of the things that I heard a lot, I call it the higher bid order of diversity, is people's mental modality, quad modal, bimodal, trimodal, as far as their core kind of behavior attributes, have a diverse team of folks and how they think. So I've seen a lot of people who just had, let's say, a political science background or an English background, not necessarily comp sci itself, but the teams in their composition would have people who had technical backgrounds, a lot of people who had more, not so technical, so to speak, but as they're able to support each other and contribute collectively to a common goal. But I will say having a technical background is an advantage, because they push you in a unique position where your core skills or hard skills has more use cases across the business than someone who may have very soft skills, being able to negotiate or build bridges or manage escalations, which are important too. But they may have a different place as far as the value chain or business cycle, et cetera.
So I'm gonna switch up just a little bit, because you've sort of switched over into what would be considered the ed tech space, right? So education and technology space that opens you up to the world of education in some ways, right? So thinking about that experience that you've had coming in as a person that's gone through the school system and doing all those fun things, developing the skill, then being in the actual industry. Right? How do we create the next Hannibal? What would you say would be some of the big idea that you would want teachers or educators who are looking to build out students that think similarly or would have some of the same skill sets moving out of the school system, K-12? What would be the things that you feel like they would need to either focus on or be thoughtful of as they are teaching or educating?
I would say, and this is also part of the company's mission or slogan, sparking the joy of learning, but there's truth in that. As I reflect on my time as a kid and what got me excited in the classroom, whether it was the paper mache, I made a dragonfly out of paper and glue, made a little Native American dolls, and that's just the non-techie side. The techie side was back in the giant disc they brought in for a display or Apple computer and playing Number Cruncher or Oregon Trail. Those things were exciting because they had not been seen before. So it sparked a level of excitement to where I wanted to, pass the test or what have you, and they would have access to this new tool or gadget that I didn't have at home. Right? Kids want to see the art of the possible. They want something or someone or all of the above to expose them to things that they would not have seen otherwise, because then that creates a chain reaction. And so similarly, as a core theme that traverses time, I said the same principle holds true. With so much more stimuli in our world now, dial-up was you was extra privileged. You had dial-up. Nowadays, you got LTE and 5G, and everybody has a cell phone at 5 years old, iPhone, smartphone at 5 years old. what is that next thing that's going to push the envelope that they aren't already exposed to? I mean, I see babies already getting very familiar with touchscreens and things. So that becomes the min bar requirement as far as the classroom itself, as opposed to exposing it to something new and what's around the corner to really spark that excitement. I think that's the current challenge. And I know for our industry, for our specific product and our competitors, it's interesting now that we have this forced scenario, we have to think about education or teaching is not confined to four walls of the classroom. And so it's not confined to the four walls, but then if engaging students are already a challenge in the classroom, then how you continue to engage students beyond the classroom when they are physically present. And so that is a unique challenge, but I think it's a reality that we have to contend with as the world continues to evolve technologically at a more exponential rate. So education and teachers, I would imagine, have even greater challenge of staying ahead of the curve, looking ahead, and how to bring in, introduce that to students in the classroom or in their home, wherever they may be. So I would say that's been the challenge that we've seen from my company and our competitors, supporting this learn from anywhere. Everywhere is a place to learn, so to speak, and also introducing ideas or concepts that are cutting edge, that isn't ubiquitous or readily accessible to the masses, that will still, when introduced to students, is something new, something different that can pique their fantasy and get them engaged.
Now, getting to know Hannibal a little bit better, right? Because everyone sort of thinks that what you do for your career is the only thing that you really like to do, right? So what are some things outside of computer science and technology that Hannibal really enjoys?
Well, so I guess wellness and fitness has grown more and more important to me as I gotten older. The kid within about why things are the way they are, what can I do to change it, that persists. And so one of my things is still kind of researching and ideating on what I could contribute to the world using my skills, whether it be comp sci, whether it be using the app, but how to honestly, I'll say educate or spread enlightenment to folks who otherwise historically have not had access to that type of knowledge. So that's one of the things that I constantly think about for myself, but also for others. If I have these struggles with trying to figure out what I should or should not eat at this age, in life, aside from that, one of my passions I've not had the opportunity to exercise for quite some time, mentoring, and it's particularly using the tool of stepping as a vehicle for such. That was also a great way for me to exercise the creative side of the brain, but also still be very process-centric and outcome-driven. So I'm looking forward to re-engaging that hobby of mine. And I'll say just, experiencing life. Again, part of the inquisitive nature is, let me see the world as much of it as possible. It's a whole lot to see and very little time to do it. And I have relatives who, unfortunately, are happy staying in a small town that they've been in their entire life. I'm like, why? There's a huge world out there, and why not see? Because it helps you to understand more about home, where you're from, who you are. And honestly, in my case, having lived abroad and traveled, a great appreciation for once I come into who I am.
I want to make sure, because we haven't really talked about this, where you grew up, right? Because your hometown is a small town situation, somewhat rural.
What the Thai metro area has a population just under 500,000.
Like it's adjacent, right? You came from not necessarily a major city situation, but from more of a rural space, and was able to make these moves to do things that have now taken you around the world to some degree. I wanted to identify that idea of traveling, wanted to do that. That was something that was not necessarily the norm where you were, if that makes sense, which makes that even more of a triumph to some degrees, if you will, to think about it that way and to have that mindset that you want to go and do different things. Because like you said, a lot of people are okay with being in that same space, which is not necessarily a bad thing either.
Or they may not have been presented opportunity or told that such exists beyond that perimeter, so to speak, which I think speaks to, again, having parents and mentors in academia along the way that got me involved in extracurricular activities that exposed me to not only those activities, but places beyond South Carolina.
Nice. Very quickly for me, you mentioned it and kind of kept going. What is stepping?
Oh, stepping. Oh, I hate using this reference because it isn't the real actual term, but it's embedded in the pop culture now. Stomp the yard will be the Hollywood example of what is more commonly referred to as stepping, which is really is derived from Africa, was used as a tool among slaves to communicate when they couldn't speak and for code. But ultimately, it is a way of rhythmic, synchronized movements that create sound and visuals and conveys a story from how you arrange it. And it's actually very, very prevalent in the Black community, especially the Southern Black community. And you'll see it's pretty prolific in the Black Greek life also. And so it's very competitive. It's very fun. It's a lot of work. So if you had to put into steps, say 3 to 4 steps, what would need to happen in order for someone to become your role or your job in your space, what would you say? I would say operate in the spirit of why you can't versus how can you. I mean, I use that regularly. It's not that why we can't do something, it's how can we get something accomplished. So I would say for our steps, learn as much as you can, be a sponge for knowledge. Think beyond just that moment in time, but try to think 2, 3, 4 steps ahead and how what you're doing now will contribute to where you're trying to go. And that the context of transferable skills. Just because you're an engineer doesn't mean you have to remain an engineer, but the skills that you acquire as an engineer, craft that story, be able to tell that story on how what you've acquired, what you've done is applicable not only in the STEM space, but applicable in the finance space or applicable in the political space, because there is connective tissue across all of those things. We have to connect the dots for others because they themselves may not do it for you.